I was asked to, kind of give a presentation about something that I think we'd all benefit from, and I think this is a good one. What happens after the 150 grid process? As we all know, as collision repairs, where we do a welded panel installation, whether it be a quarter panel, an apron, inner structure, the time that the database provides is up to a 150 grid. So there's a gap that really isn't even acknowledged, but it's starting to get there. So this is an example of when we've most commonly encountered a situation on a quarter panel replacement. What panels and substrates can this involve? It can be anywhere from a rear body panel, quarter panel, pillars and apertures, frame rails, the floor pans, aprons, inner structures, door skins, exterior panels, and bumpers when you're doing like a repair. And then again, it can involve steel, aluminum, SMC composites, plastic, and carbon fiber. We're starting to see that more and more. So what happens with our repair time is we're left with a panel that's up to 150 grid. And we all know that 150 grid is not a process that we can start the paint process on. We can't apply paint over that, let alone even primer, because we all know that deadly sand scratch is going to come back and bite us in the butt. So this is an example. This is an example of various grids that we commonly see from from that 150 where we finish that repair, and then we have the 240s, 320s, 400s when that paint process may need to start being applied. And again, this is an example of leaving a panel in that 150 grit. You'll see over here, you've got a lot of sand scratches happening beyond the filler. So again, those are the things that are going to come back and shrink and swell, and then you'll see your repair. Again, more common up close examples of what these sand scratches look like. Again, standing back, we may not see them, but you can imagine a car sitting in the sun baking over time. That all that material product will just come back and start shrinking into those pores and the scratches and become visible. So from CCC and Motor in the Guide to Estimating, they've acknowledged that prime and block high build primer is a required procedure that restores a repaired panel surface, including joined areas of a replaced welded panel from 150 grit finish to a new undamaged panel condition. It's Motor's position that the prime and block is a refinishing process best reserved for the judgment of an estimator appraiser following through an on-the-spot evaluation of a specific vehicle and damage in question. So I think the thing that we need to talk about is, not only for repairs, but on a welded panel replacement, again, we still have to continue that process to a new undamaged panel state, which is not included. And then the same thing from Mitchell in the Collision Estimating Guide. Feather prime and block, it is not included refinish operation that completes a bodywork repair from 150 grit smoothness to the condition of a new undamaged panel, and at the point when refinish labor time begins. So again, we want to bring that panel to the new undamaged state. The next.
Danny, I think an important point is that it's identified as a refinish operation.
Correct.
Because in past history, a lot of times we were led to believe that was a function of the body technician, when in fact it's a refinish operation.
Correct.
The procedure needs to be performed in the paint
It needs to
department.
be performed in the paint shop by a trained technician that's under OSHA compliant in an enclosed environment. No longer are we spraying primers and these products out in the workplace. We got to be in a contained area using our PPE, all these protection to ensure that the product is being applied properly. Now in Auditex, they do recognize feather prime and block as a non-included operation as well, just like the other IPs. Now what's interesting about Auditex's DBRM guide is that on welded panel replacements, they do consider the time of bringing that panel of including feather prime and block in their panel replacement time. So that is one thing to note in the Auditex DBRM, that they do include the on a welded panel to feather prime and block that panel and get it ready for a refinish process. But one thing that they do also, like all the three IPs mentioned, is the material allowance for the feather prime and block process, if necessary, is not included. So that's another thing we need to consider, that the inclusion of materials is, it's not. So we need to consider any primers, the sandpapers, the masking of the vehicle as separate operations. And in Autotext, you actually do have the ability to, when you're doing like a repair panel, to allocate your prime and block time and assign a material rate to your prime and block.
Now, unless something has changed, you can do that on a repair
On a repaired panel, but not on a panel replacement, so you got to do a manual entry for that.
even though they identify it as
Refinish.
included in the labor department.
Correct. Correct.
Danny?
Yes.
Is that for all welded panels? Any attachment that's welded?
In Autotext, all welded panels, yes, unless it's otherwise stated, because the footnotes or the H notes would override anything in the. So again, we want to talk about the not included operations. Again, that additional labor to repair that 150 grit scratches to a primer ready stage. Now, one thing we want to follow is always follow a refinish manufacturer's TDS sheets for the preparation directions. Some may call for 240, some may call for 320. It's really important to follow that TDS to ensure what you're doing is what they want. Material cost is not included. That's a huge thing that we need to really factor into our repair plan, is the material cost associated with all this stuff. Whether you list it into your refinish category, or you separate it out, you just need to get that considered. Masking of the vehicle, not only is the labor not included, but also the material cost of that masking, and then again the feather prime and block. So this is an example of a replacement panel. Some vehicle manufacturers are welding them, and now we're seeing a lot of glued-on panels. But again, we're not going to send a car to our paint shop in this condition, with the nuts and the glue still, exposed from the joint. So that's an example of on a C-pillar or on a sail panel when we need to continue that additional repair time. So in the panel replacement time, we're going to apply it, whether it be a weld or adhesive joint. We'll go to the next screen. And then it's going to say up to 150 grit. And here's an example of what a panel looks like in 150 grit stage. Now, are we ready for paint? No. So we got to take that additional step in additional repair time. It could be additional product of polyester filler, whatever the product may be. But we need to get that area smoothed out and contoured and get it ready to a prime and block application, up to a 320 grit, for example. And then we're going to do the feather prime and block process and get it ready to a new undamaged panel condition. Now we're ready. Once it's prime and blocked, now we can get it ready for paint, get the color, the clear coat applied, and then refinish the vehicle.
Hey, Dan. What about the back side of all the welded flanges?
That's again not an included operation for any of the backside. The adjacent panel, weld zone burns. Again, this is just to focus on that gap between the 150 grit to a primer to a paint application ready stage. That's not included. And then we complete the vehicle and put it back together. So again, if we just left it in 150 grit, you would see those scratches coming back at the sail panel. And a lot of cars, you're not just doing this at one area of the vehicle. It could be 3, 4 areas just for one panel installation that we need to consider that. So what do we do when we're not clear on this information? We can look in the P pages, we can scour through those things which we need to read. But again, the DEG is here to help you find that information if you're having a hard time. We've actually had inquiries submitted about this, and we were able to point the users in the right way, in the right direction to get that information. So go into our website, degweb.org. In the upper right corner, we can open an inquiry. And then you can fill out the inquiry form with your shop information, what database it is, Autotext, CCC, or Mitchell. Again, the vehicle information and what your inquiry concern is. And then the inquiry gets submitted. And this is an example of a inquiry in regards to at what point does that repair stop and starts to the next process. So once we get the inquiry, we'll either locate the answer in the P pages. If it's not addressed in there, then we'll go directly to the IP appropriately and get that resolution for you and get clarification for the end user. So once it's resolved, we'll get an inquiry resolution from the IP. And then again, what we found on this case is a CCC that the not included operations can be found in the motors GTE guide under the center pillar section. Grind and fill in smooth welded seams up to 150 grit isn't included in the replacement time, but there may be additional labor operations to consider, which can be found in the labor premise of the section of the guide, which is typically found in your refinish, labor premise, or your basic color code application. Thank you.